Here's what you should know about your local housing market in this week's Market Update. Interest rates are the hot topic this week. The Fed met and they did vote to reduce the Fed funds rate. Important thing to keep in mind, we did see a decrease in mortgage interest rates this week as well, but do note that the Fed does not set mortgage rates. The mortgage rates are affected by the changes in the Fed funds rate. Why is that important? Well, don't always assume that a change in the Fed funds rate is going to correlate to a change in the mortgage rates. Especially don't assume it's going to correlate to an equal change in the mortgage interest rates. Oftentimes, when interest rate changes from the Fed are expected, mortgage rates will adjust based on those expectations and not based on reality. And then when the vote happens, any adjustment in the mortgage rate is usually the differential between what was expected and what actually played out. But overall, the good news is we've seen another decrease in mortgage rates. We've seen a lot of mortgage applications. We've seen a big increase in mortgage applications. And also very helpful is we've seen a huge increase in mortgage refinances. Well, we're talking about the housing market, and how does a refinance help the housing market? These are people that are staying in their house and just getting a new mortgage. Well, we have been experiencing and suffering from what we've been calling the lock-in effect. Basically, with people having such low mortgage interest rates, they've been reluctant to sell because if they sell, they're likely moving to a new house, getting a new mortgage at a higher rate. So the greater number of homeowners that have a mortgage interest rate at either in line with the market or at least the current mortgage interest rate being closer to that rate that they are locked in at, that helps incentivize people to move, decreases those barriers of moving, and will hopefully and likely spur on inventory in the housing market, which is something we've been suffering from for quite a while. So that being said, let's get into the stats and see what things are looking like this week in Morristown, Chatham, Madison, Harding, Morris Plains, Mendham, Chester, Bernardsville, Basking Ridge, and Randolph. This week, we saw 54 homes come on the market. That is a 6% increase over the prior week. 44 of those were single-family houses, and 10 of those were condos or townhouses. So yet again, we saw an even greater share of those being single-family houses, which is great because that's where a majority of the demand sits. Average list price of these homes was $1,114,000. That is a decrease of 13% over last week. The town with the highest average list price this past week was Chatham with $1,682,000. Total inventory is flat. Total inventory, we currently have 249 homes actively on the market. That is basically zero change from last week. That is one additional home from last week. So 0% increase over last week. Sold homes, we saw 36 homes sell this past week. That is a 50% increase over the prior week. So substantial increase in homes sold. We saw the greatest number of home sales both in Morristown and Morris Township and in Randolph with 9 and 8 respectively. Average list price of homes that sold this past week was $1,149,000. The average sale price of homes sold this past week was $1,189,000. So this past week, homes sold for an average of 4.6% above list price. And something else that is really special to note this week as compared to last week. Last week, we saw about a 50-50 between towns where homes sold above list price and below list price. This past week, we only saw 2 towns that had an average selling below list price, and that was Chester, where homes sold for an average of 4% below list price, and that was just one home that sold. And then in Madison, where homes sold for an average of 1.8% below list price. Other than that, every single one of the towns on our list, the homes sold above list price, anywhere from just 0.6% above list price in Bernardsville, all the way up to 15.3% above list price in Morris Plains. So we've got a good share of those substantially above list price. 12.1% above list price in Chatham, 9.6% above list price in Randolph, 4% above list price in Morristown and Township. So it looks like we're back to seeing homes selling substantially above list price. Let's see how that trend continues to play out. Average days on market of homes sold was 26 days. That's a 9% increase over the prior week. And then finally, under contract. What is currently happening in the market right now? We saw 47 homes sold go under contract this past week. That's an 88% increase over the prior week. That's huge. That's real big. Average list price of the homes that went under contract was $1,140,000. That's a 5% increase over last week. And then the median days on the market was just 18 days for these homes that went under contract. And that is a 27% decrease over the last week. So I don't know if we have to chalk it up to fall, autumn, back to school coming into play, or if this is a big influence from decrease in mortgage interest rates, or a combination of both. So we're going to continue to track these market trends. It looks like things are moving in a positive direction. Let's see if that can continue. So thanks so much for checking in with me, and I'll catch you guys again next week.